Israel has been experiencing relatively rapid economic growth, from a GDP of $27,700 in 2009 to $43,500 in 2019. That is a 43% growth in just 10 years. Israel is not a predominantly export-based economy, but rather a balance between a local market and foreign investments. At the same time, exports, especially services, are an essential component of Israel's economic growth. My name is Yishai Gelb from the Geo Report, and in this video, which was written and prepared by Ramy Rachmiel, we'll cover Israel's exports. 2019 was a record year for Israeli exports, totaling $114 billion with an annual growth of 6.5%. However, between the years 2018 and 2019, the growth was only 5% due to the decrease in the exports of diamonds. The diamond industry was important in Israel's early years. However, the industry has been losing its importance in recent years. If in 2016 diamond exports consisted of 8% of total exports, then in 2019 the number plummeted down to just 4%. One of the causes is the fluctuation of the global markets, mainly the demand for diamonds in the USA, China, Hong Kong, and the change in supply from India and other countries. In 2018, Israel exported $6.82 billion worth of diamonds, while in 2019, Israel exported just $4.97 billion worth of diamonds. Another major cause for the decrease in the diamond share of the exports is the rise in chemical, electronics, and mainly high-tech exports, steadily rising over the past decade. We will dive into some numbers to get a good look at Israeli exports. Putting aside the export of diamonds, Israeli exports of goods in 2019 stood at $54.2 billion compared to $48.2 in 2016. Between 2018 and 2019, the export of goods rose 4.2% instead of an 11% rise in the exports of services. In 2019, Israel's main exports were chemicals, which consisted of 30% of total exports, and electronics were responsible for 28% of Israeli exports. Both industries are the most dominant in Israeli exports. Most of these exports are to the European Union due to the relatively close distance between Israeli ports and EU ports and the high purchasing power in the EU. For example, Britain's GDP in 2019 was $43,000, which is high enough to consume higher-end products, in contrast to regions like East Asia and Africa. Therefore, the success of Israeli chemical and electronics exports depend on the purchasing power of the countries importing Israeli goods and the needs of the importing countries. For example, most of the Israeli exports to Britain are chemicals and medicine, while most Israeli exports to India are medical equipment. The exports to the EU and North America have been relatively stable, which stood at around $12 billion annually. However, the exports to China have risen 400% in the past decade, even with the 3% decrease in 2018 due to the escalating trade war between the US and China. When looking at who is responsible for most of the exporting, the picture isn't pretty. Just 49 companies in Israel are responsible for over 60% of all exports, which demonstrates the dominance that a small number of corporations have in the market. The majority of those 49 companies are based in the center of Israel and on the coastal plains of the Mediterranean, which teaches us where most economic activity occurs. So naturally, exporting corporations are stationed close to transportation hubs, which is on the coast in Israel's case. Most of Israel's population lives in the coastal plains, which explains why most firms are located there as well. Moving on to Israel's fastest growing industry overall, the service-based businesses. If in 2016, services consisted of 41.3% of exports, then in 2019, that number jumped to 48.4%. Such a jump is significant, especially in the programs-based services, R&D, consulting, and telecommunications. It is essential to consider the relative ease of starting an internet-based company compared to building a factory. Israel, deficient in natural resources or rivers for easy cargo transport, can do exports in industries that don't require natural resources or good transportation routes. Therefore, internet-based companies, or in other words high-tech, are a natural fit for Israel's geographical situation. The total amount of services exports grew 17.5% per year from 2015 from $39 billion to $55.4 billion in 2019, which means that most of Israel's growth in exports came from services. The services industry, software, website building, storage, and cybersecurity grew at the fastest rate, from $16.5 billion in 2013 to $28.8 billion in 2018. In addition, R&D and scientific development rose from $4 billion in 2015 to $9 billion in 2019. From all this data, we can come to several conclusions. First, Israel is better off developing its service-based economy, especially in software, development, and high-tech overall, by helping expand computer-based education fields and increasing the number of programmers in the country. The rationale is that it is a lot less expensive to start a high-tech company than it is to start a traditional company in manufacturing. Second, increasing the exports to the EU and North America is more stable than exporting to the Far East, particularly China. Third, as the tensions between the USA and China continues to rise, Israel will decrease its exports to China or the Far East, predominantly service-based exports, mainly because most of Israel's exports are directed to consumers and not governments, as opposed to other government-focused industries like energy and natural resources. Thank you for watching this analysis of Israel's exports. If you like this video, please help us out by subscribing to the channel and visiting our website to see more content on geopolitics in Israel, the Middle East, and around the world.